We're back with another edition of Ikigai Leadership with my good friend James Bonato, amazing videographer and filmmaker. And surprise, surprise, we're here for another documentary, which is fantastic, by the way. It is about the life of Dr. Saundra Rhode, and thank you and welcome, Dr. Saundra, for being here today and for sharing your amazing, amazing story. And I'm going to say amazing a lot today because honestly, what Dr. Rhode's been through would be harrowing to anyone.
Meet my grandmother, Dr. Saundra Rhode. She was caught in a web of frequent struggles, a web of unspeakable hardships that seemed impossible to escape from.
If you're in the gutter and you got nobody else to turn to outside of God, trust you me, that's the woman you want on your team.
So James, tell us about the film.
Well, goodness gracious, it was a long time coming. It's my 5th documentary film, and all of my films are really based on just making a difference and trying to inspire people. And as the 5th film, I really kind of based it on my 2nd film, which is actually called The Smith Perspective. And that is a film about a family who really was in crisis, and they had a very large, tall mountain to climb to get over something that was very hard to get over. And they taught us about empathy and caring and resilience and just inspiring what they did. I wanted to do another film like that. I said, I want to do another Smith Perspective, obviously not with the Smiths, but with somebody else. And I said, well, where can I find someone? And I was asking around. I said, do you know anybody who's been through hell and has come out like a shining star? And not only that, inspired people. And I was asking around, and I actually asked Sandy if she knew anybody. And she goes, you know, I might have a person, I think some guy or whatever. And then a couple of weeks later, she contacted him. She goes, he's in jail right now, so I don't think he's going to really qualify to be in your resilience film. So I was asking more people, and I came across Trayvon, her grandson, who actually is in the room staring at us. And I'd asked him about it. I said, do you know anybody who's been through hell and has come out shining star and is inspiring? And he was like, yeah, my grandmother. I was like, oh my God. It's right in front of my nose. I've known her for 35 years, and she was right in front of my nose. And I think it came across to me that I was going to ask her that, but I quickly dismissed it because I knew that her position as a therapist and whatever, and I didn't really think that she wanted to put her life all out on the table for that. But Trayvon said, you know, I think she would be good. So I called her, and I said, you know, thanks for trying to get somebody, but Trey came up with somebody, and he came up with you. So she was very flattered about it, and she was, I don't think, we were talking on the phone, and she was telling me why she wouldn't be able to do it, and I was expecting that, but I kept testing the waters a little bit, and I said, you know, Sandy, you in front of the camera and me behind the camera, come on now. We're going to knock it out of the park. I'm sure that we can do that. So I implanted that seed in her head, and a couple of weeks later, she said yes. So in this 5th film, okay, I wanted to repeat that that matter of inspiring people.
And honestly, you did. I mean, both of you knocked it out of the park. I mean, the film is fantastic, and it deals with some really, really deep stuff. I mean, but backing up for a second, I think it says a lot about you, Sandy, that you didn't think about yourself first as an option for this film. Because when you think about resilience and when you watch the film, it's like, who else could you think of? Okay, that's literally what's going through my head as I was watching the film. And it's just the things you went through and came out the other side of, and the way you came out the other side of it. What was it like sharing that story with James?
Well, it was hard to go back and remember all of the things because that was a fresh wound, pretty much. But Bill made it easier simply because he let me just talk about it. But it wasn't hard when I got over into it, but I was nervous at first to even talk about it, definitely not to let anybody know what was going on with me in those years. One, that's scary to let people know what you've done. And because of all the things that I did do or went through, it was very private and personal. And so the other thought was, wow, I have a family and they have to know what happened and I have to tell the truth. And that was scary because, you have to risk a relationship. So, but Bill made it easier for me when I interviewed. So, and immediately after that, I got scared. Simply because I said, oh my God, this is real now. Yeah. This is what we're about to do. And I was very nervous when I got home for weeks, just thinking about one day it's going to be in the movie where, you were showing the premiere. And so that was about it. Just rehearsing all that I said, rehearsing my background, and just kind of confronting some things I thought I had forgotten. And I knew I had to face those things as well. So pretty much that was it till the day of.
And it took a lot of bravery, honestly. I mean, the stuff you shared, to your point, opening up that much to folks, to strangers, yeah, right? Much less your family, and it's almost, I almost think it might be more difficult to open up to your family than it is to strangers because of that, like you said, risking that relationship. What was the reaction from your family when you shared everything?
Well, there were some mixed reactions and not so good, but it's okay. We'll talk through it and we'll come to something, some agreement or something. But I look at it, this is my story, regardless of you understanding or you not knowing about it. It was my story. And there are times when people don't really know what's going on with you, even if it's your siblings. So I had to realize I'm telling my story from my heart. This is what happened to me. And we just have to work through the story.
Yeah, and coming out of the other side of it and the work you're doing now with young people, it's inspiring, truly and truly inspiring. And it's all over the world too. So would you mind sharing a little bit about the kind of work that you're doing now for folks?
Right now or before or during?
Well, I mean, over the last, 20, 30 years.
Wow. Over the last, I'll say 42 years. Yeah, I've done a lot of programs, the Miss Sweetheart Scholarship Pageant, Raise the Curtain, Gate 12. And these were programs, it started out with just young ladies because I felt like I needed to reach little young girls because of the experience that I had. And if, in fact, I could do anything to help them get over any issues that they were dealing with, not really knowing about trauma and all of that, but if I could aid them in some kind of way, then this is the program I would put together. So the first one was Miss Sweetheart Pageant, and this was, like maybe 50 girls. Am I correct, Bill? Because you filmed it.
It was about 50.
Yeah, and so we didn't just, it was a pageant, but we didn't just have the pageant. We dealt with, for 9 months, self-esteem and, just everything. And then that grew out of me including young men later on because I realized that there are brothers in the home. And so that was my next phase of what we were doing, and we called that, I spin that into Raise the Curtain. It was another program, and that's where we included males, young men as well. And that was a program where we literally dealt with the men as well as the women with regards to self-esteem, and basically the same trauma and rages and things that I went through in the film when you hear it. We then turned that program into Gate 12. So what I was really doing when I was doing all these programs was setting it up for the generations. So each generation needed something different, so I would tailor the program based on the generation, the next generation. And so now what am I doing? The program that we had a couple before that, but the program I'm doing now is called Next Gen. It's a holistic approach to how we deal with young people and their families. Realizing that, okay, this is all great to deal with the young people, to help them out. However, there wasn't a lot of change effective changes, to say it that way. There was some changes, but there wasn't a lot of effective changes for them. So I figured, okay, the same thing that happened to me is no one dealt with the siblings of the family, the mother and father. So now this program involves the families as well. The mom, the dad, the guardian, the whomever is taking care of these children. So while we're trying to get them in a place of stability, we need to find out now, okay, mom, dad, we're getting ready to produce something, but we need your help. Whether you want to agree with it or not, let me tell you how we're going to do this. So we do that. My most recent program is called 100 Gents. And in that, I went to the school system. We are trying to set up a program now for those young boys between the ages of 8 and 11, before they hit the street, that are suspended from school for non-criminal behavior, and have to reintegration part of it. And so to deal with that is to make sure that when they're suspended, they're not just suspended and doing nothing at home, but let's supply them with something. That would have to be with the permission of the parents, and that is to tutor. Of course, that would be the first thing, to get them back in school and to get them pulled up. But the most important thing behind that is dealing with their self-esteem, social behaviors, all of that. So to develop that is to be able to put things in place where they're able to take advantage of before they go back to school. So when they go back to school, they're not just coming up with their homework and all that, but now they've built a little bit of confidence that will keep them from being suspended every week, every month, every 2 months. And so this is what we're doing now. And the reason I call it 100 Gents is because we want 100 young men between the ages of 8 and 11. And that number just came to me, and so that's what I'm doing now. And so I'm putting that program together now.
That's fantastic. I mean,
And I'm going to be part of 100 Gents. I'm going to be involved in that.
awesome.
Yeah.
So what's your role going to be with 100 Gents, James?
Video, surprise, surprise. I'm going to try and teach video. We haven't talked about it too much, but she already told me about it, and I said, well, I'm in.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And we're going to, not just video, but karate, drama. And of course, Trey is sitting in the audience right now, who's been you heard him he was in school in California. So we're trying to put things in place. One of the things will be therapy, for sure. And we have a therapist on staff that we're able to, and not just on staff, but my daughter also has a program where she does psychiatric rehabilitation. So, just setting up a list of things that they can do and be involved in before they go back to school or while they're in school. So is this just one time for them? No, we're going to follow them from whatever grade they are in up until they finish elementary school.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think one of the things that I love that you guys are doing is the holistic approach, right? Approaching the parents and the environment that they're in, because so many times you work with the young folks and then they go back to the same environment, and what's going to happen? They'll fall into the same patterns, right?
Absolutely. And I do know that helps a lot, because even when we used to do camps, I used to do camp for what was about 10 years. Bill was a part of that because he filmed every camp we went to. I've been knowing him for 35 years, so we worked together a lot. But even in the camps, I realized that when we got back home from the camp, we had to add another program that would involve the parents. So we have your week. We have made some changes. We took you out of your environment. So now you're going back home. You're going back home as partially changed. You're going back home with some new methods, some new ways of dealing with anger and behavior and all of that. And now we've got to reach the family to find out, okay, we've done this, but now you have to do this. Not have to, but let's give you some tools that you could use to accept the change and keep pushing for us. Yeah. And so we follow them in school and all of that. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So going back to the film for a second, James, for you, what was it like being on the other side of the camera and hearing Sandy's story as she was telling it? I mean, did you know all the details before the film?
No, I knew about 50% of the details. No, I didn't know the whole story until I started to get into it. But I was drawn to have her in the film because in the most simplistic form, the most simplistic sentences, she tries to do good. And I'm always trying to do good. And you would think that would be like a peaches and cream type assignment. You want to do good, and of course you're going to get reciprocated. Well, you don't. Okay? sometimes it's very, very difficult. You reach out your hand to someone and they might slap it or something like that. And I've always, I saw stuff in her that I really liked that I felt in myself. That's what drew me to the film. For instance, when I see somebody, when I meet someone, and I see something in them, I'm going to, this is going to be a friend of mine, and I want to be there for them. And even if they resent it or reject it, I press, which has gotten me into some trouble in the past. But I'm going to push until it gives, until they realize who that is. She does the same thing, and I wanted to bring that out in the film. But usually I try and find out that, there's good in everybody. There's good in except for covert narcissists. That's a different part of that. That's a different subject of the.
That's a different interview.
Yeah, that's a different interview. But really, really, I wanted to bring that out in the film. That was my major drive, to do that, to bring out, wanting to do a good thing. And I do that in all of my films, but in Resilience Has a Face, it's the same.
And I think you did a great job with that, especially with dealing with such deep trauma. The way you balance that in the film is frankly masterful. And the way you talk about it, Sandy, as well. It's heavy topics, it's heavy subject material, but what you've done with it, what you've taken it and turned that energy into, it would have been very easy for you to crawl into a hole and make it like this is my identity is trauma, but you've taken that and you've turned it on its head. What inspired you to do that?
One, I fought to change deep down inside of me, even though I was, faced with all this trauma. You don't feel good. I didn't want to be stagnant because I felt that if I get stagnant in this situation, the trauma itself pushes you to do things that you ordinarily wouldn't do. That is the anger and the rage that you're involved in. And so if you get stuck there, like people just want to feel sorry for themselves and that kind of thing, I couldn't stay there. I couldn't feel sorry for myself anymore because feeling sorry keeps you in a space. And all that space does is allow you to think negative. Well, I was already on a train to be negative. I was already in a rage where I could have done anything to anyone. So to be in that space would have taken me back. And to go back would have been a double, situation where I probably would have carried out everything I was thinking that I wanted to do. And so, and I'm talking about negative, killing maybe. I might have been in jail, I don't know. But I knew I had to get out of that space. And to do that was to fight through it. And of course, the only person that got me out of that was me knowing God himself. Just meeting him, let's say it that way. Meeting him on the bus.
Yeah. You talked about that. And the way you talked about it in the film, it's very, very fascinating because it's and not to get into a woo-woo world, but frankly, I mean, there is, if you think about things through that perspective of there being a higher power, whatever you call it, right? The way you describe it in the film is very philosophical. It's very spiritual. It's not something that leans any one religion or another, and that's what I think is really powerful about it, and what really inspires people when they watch the film. Is that it's like you can watch this as a Christian, you can watch it as a Muslim, you can watch it as a Jewish person, you can watch it as a Hindu, and it still can appeal to you. It doesn't alienate anybody. And I think that's what's really powerful about that, is that motivation, that energy that drove you to do these things. What allowed you to tap into that and get out of that negativity and really and say, this is what I'm gonna latch onto. I'm gonna choose this as opposed to the negativity.
What made me do that?
What allowed you to choose that? Yeah.
To choose what part, when he was speaking to me?
Yeah. So when he was speaking to you, so you described him speaking to you on the bus. What in you allowed you to choose that?
It wasn't just seeing or speaking. It was the feeling that came behind that. I can't describe what that felt like. There's no way to describe it, but it was almost as though it was a ton of bricks that hit me in my heart. The feeling was a feeling of love that I had never experienced before, so that's the only way I can think of. It had to be love because it was so powerful. And what what I said was, if you can get me out of this space that I'm in, I will do whatever is necessary. And, I meant that. The reason I was so forceful in making that statement was because of the feeling behind that, indescribable. I don't even know how to describe it, but I knew it was greater than greater than a normal person or greater than me, or just, it was great.
Yeah.
And I chose that because that was a feeling that I never felt before.
The way you described it in the film, when I was watching it, love comes up, but also acceptance, like a pure acceptance of like you, and the way you described it in the film was really just kind of awesome, in a very pure way of that word, When you shared that with your husband, can you describe that for a second? 'Cause I know you talk about it in the film, but
Yeah, I was on the bus, and I pretty much was looking out of the window of the bus, and I saw this really bright light. I saw myself suspended outside of the bus window, and I had a conversation. Now, when the bus stopped and it was my turn to get off, everything just cut off. But I felt that feeling that I couldn't get rid of, so I jumped off the bus, I ran home, and I bust through the door, and I said, guess what? I just had a conversation with God. And he was looking at me like, what? You did what? And I was like, well, I didn't want to interrupt that feeling that I had. I was like, okay, so he's not ready. So let me just move on in my heart. But I was the happiest person for just about maybe 5 minutes because of this feeling that I had. But it didn't stay. But it wasn't that he didn't receive it. It's just that he was like, what?
he didn't know how to take it.
No, not. I mean, the way that I burst through the door, he probably thought, well, is she really seeing someone for real? Is this, So, yeah. So I just let it sit for a minute, and then we talked later.
But I think even that choice of you not pushing the issue, right? To be like, because like you said, you felt that, and then you knew that was gonna almost like, I wouldn't say ruin it, but that would change the feeling if you kept pushing it and he pushed back because he didn't understand it. It wasn't like he was negative; he just didn't understand it, right?
Right.
I think that was an important choice that you made to keep it to yourself for the moment and kind of pull back and like, all right, let me just figure this out, and then over time.
Well, I think the feeling that I had behind it, which I didn't want to let go, was this is my time to get rid of all the ways that I felt. It's almost as if the rage, the anger was lifted. And I don't know how to explain how something like that can be lifted from your life or your life. And then you feel a certain way. You feel so positive because you're not in that space anymore. If you carry stuff like that for a long time and then all of a sudden you're free from it, you don't know how it happened. And I can't tell you how it happened, except God himself just knows how to do that. And so I didn't want to lose that. I didn't want to lose the freedom.
Well, I think some people, they get comfortable with that feeling. They get comfortable in that dark place, and they're like start defining themselves that way. It's just, this is who I am. This is what I am, right? And they never feel that acceptance, that love, and experience what that's like, because, and if they do, then they're afraid of leaning into that because they're afraid of losing that, right? It's like, what happens if I lose that? But because you had that experience with that pure energy, it's like, you're not going to lose it. And I don't know if that resonates with you. That's what occurred to me in my head as I was thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it exactly. And more importantly is, you just can't stay in that place if you want to change. Some people do, some people don't. Some people, it's not a decision that they want to make, but they don't know how to change. They don't know. And the reason I said this was so important for me is because I didn't know how to change either. But I yearned for it in my heart. And I just believe the fact that I yearned for it, that's why I had that experience. And then I was afraid to stay in the space that I was in. I was afraid of me. I was afraid of what I would do. I was afraid.
So Sandy, when you're thinking about coming out of this, you mentioned that you didn't even know how you came out of it, right? When you work with young people nowadays, how do you help them move past and get out of what they're dealing with?
One of the things I learned is talking it out. find out how to help them is to allow them to talk and to say how they feel, and then take pieces of those feelings and deal with it in terms of, okay, how are we going to change the thoughts or the feelings? So, but the first, rule of thumb is to let them talk. How do they get out of it? We just work with them. We work with them. We, allow them to continue to build off of what they're saying, building the self-esteem, self-worth. And this is what we did with camp. We just let them talk. And then figure out what pieces that they're saying that we can save so we don't change their personality. But what pieces do we need to pull away to make sure their character is being built up? So, and then we offer therapy.
Talking out is underrated.
Yeah.
Because when you bottle all that inside, what does it do? It just festers, right? It builds and starts eating you out from the inside.
Absolutely, and you have to provide a safe space for them to do that, because they don't want to feel as though you're judging them, and so you have to make sure that you appear to them as non-judgmental and let them talk, and not feed on what they're saying, not even in an emotional way, as if it's your own. And give them the opportunity. And I think that's what we don't do with young people a lot. We don't allow them to talk about their feelings. They're afraid because we're so doggone judgmental.
Yeah. Well, we don't allow even adults to do that,
No,
right?
we're so judgmental, as if we've never done anything. And that's why I was so candid in the, film. Hey, this is who I am. This is what I did. So if you don't want to do anything else, you believe this. You will not be judged, and that's what I wanted to portray in the film.
Yeah. Well, James, back to you for a second. Stories are so powerful, right? I mean, just in general. And you've told some amazing stories over the years. What was the inspiration for you to make this film?
Well, of course, all 5 of my films have always been about inspiration, okay? And every time I make a film, I don't mean to do this, but every time I make a film, I actually find inspiration in myself. It's like, oh my gosh, you're inspiring me. I'm trying to have an audience be inspired, and here I am inspiring myself by what's been done in the film. Resilience Has a Face, no difference, no exception there. There were a couple of things that inspired me. One of them I want to talk to you about, and I want to take a few minutes to talk about this because it's very, very important. There was one inspiring moment that actually changed my life. My entire life was changed when I made this film, and I can tell you the exact moment when my life changed. I was interviewing Rhode, who was her husband. They call him Rhode. And I was sitting here, and I had the camera on the tripod here, and I was pointing at Rhode. And Rhode is sitting across from me in a chair, and he's talking all about Sandy. And it came to a point where he was talking about a portion of what had happened where somebody had backstabbed Sandy. And when he started to say this, I stood up, or I sat up real straight, and I was really focusing on what Rhode was saying. Because I had recently, well, not really recently, been backstabbed about 3 years ago. And it was still affecting me. I was still had all this weight on my shoulders. So I was like, well, what is Rhode going to say about this? And he said, well, Sandy was like, I'm done with this guy. He's backstabbed me, and I was friends with him. I tried to help him. I tried to work things out, and I'm done. And apparently what happened was this backstabbing guy, he had a dire straits situation, or he had some challenge or some issue. And Rhode said, who was the first person, well, not the first, but who came to this guy's side to aid him? Who came to his rescue? It was Sandy Rhode. And I said, I must have turned all white, and I had hair on the back of my neck sticking up. And I said, how in the world did Sandy Rhode do this? How did she forgive him? Because I had not forgiven the guy for the ghastly, atrocious, unfair thing that he did to me. And over the years, it had amounted to something just a little bit less than total rancidity. And absolutely still suffering from it. And when I heard that Sandy could forgive this guy, I said, you know, maybe there's a chance that I could forgive him. So I was looking at Rhode. And then at the end of the thing, I packed up my tripod and I left. And I actually asked Sandy about it. I goes, hey, Rhode said this. And she was telling me about it. And everybody who was telling me that forgiveness is something that I'm going to have to do. Sandy said it. You said it to me. Joe Smith said it to me. A couple of my best friends said it to me. And I said, you know, you guys don't understand what I'm going through. You know, you had your own things about what happened to you. And mine is so terrible you can't identify with it. And I will bet you my life. I will bet you my wife's life. I will bet you my house and all the money that I have in my banking account that I'm never going to forgive this guy. It's not going to happen. And so they said, you know, if you do, you were this first one who told me, he says, it's going to make you feel better about yourself. And I said, come on, I'm not going to feel better about myself doing that. And a dear friend of mine said, you know what? You think that you're special and you're unique, and your backstabbing story is so out of this world. We know exactly how you feel. You're not special. Its situation may be unique, but it isn't. And so Sandy and I were talking, and I'm just thinking about it right now, how my life totally changed after that conversation. She said, you know, try and find out what your backstabber was thinking. What was his angle? Was he trying to backstab you, which he wasn't. He was just doing it. And I had to put myself in his position and really understand the fact that, you know, we were once friends at one point. Can't you remember that? You must have been friends at one. Maybe he wasn't a true friend and he isn't. And it doesn't make, if you forgive him, it doesn't make, you're not condoning what he did, okay? You're not saying, oh, what you did was okay and I was wrong. No, you're just forgiving. And I was able to forgive the guy for doing this. And I took it a step further. I hate to keep rambling on, but this is a very important story. I said, you know what? I forgive him. And apparently that's all you have to do. You don't have to say, come up to the guy. But I wanted to do that. Because you know the man that I am, right? Yeah. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to ask him to sit down with me. And I consulted you about it. I consulted Sandy about it. I consulted Joe Smith about it. And I said, this is going to happen. So I emailed him. I said, let's have a sit down. And I didn't think he was going to answer me. But he did. And he says, yeah, let's have coffee at this coffee shop. So I was on the way to the coffee shop. I was driving, and I remember this as clear as day. I said, this is the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. And I'm saying all this because it's related to the movie, all right? It's related to what Sandy taught us. I said, this is the hardest thing that has ever been. And it's probably, and it beats the heck out of whatever's in second place or whatever the second hardest thing was. I said, oh my God, in 15 minutes, I'm going to be sitting across from a guy 3 feet away who at one point I wanted to strangle. But I did want to forgive him. I wanted to look him straight in the eye and tell you, I forgive you.
Absolutely.
And I did that. And I'm not going to get into the details, but we sat there for another hour. And when I left that coffee shop and when I was driving home, that the clouds just dissipated, the sun came out, and that weight that was on my shoulder, I put over, and it was gone. In an instant, it was gone. And I said, Sandy was right, Drew was right, Daphne was right, Joe Smith was right. I feel wonderful, and I didn't think that I could feel that. So when you watch the film, not specifically about that backstabbing part, but anything, and there's many that you can choose from in that film. You think something is impossible, and she teaches us that it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, one of my mentors and friends told me once, holding on to a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting them to die.
Wow.
You know who told me that? The guy behind that camera right there. Jeffrey told me the exact same thing.
And that was I don't think I fully understood it when he told me that, but then later when I was going through other stuff, it resonated because I'm like, yeah, that's absolutely true. I think I told you that as well. It's just that's something that the film does touch on. It's like what you went through. I don't want to talk about you not here. What you went through, and came out the other side of. As you are right now, as the woman you are right now, as the work you're doing right now, as the inspiration you are to the people in the world, the work you're doing across the board, what inspired James to make this film, it's nothing short of amazing, you know. And you're touching so many lives. You've already touched so many lives, and you're continuing to touch even more lives. And the fact that you made this film now, it gives you even more latitude to get the message out there, and that's so powerful. So, wrapping up a little bit here, I don't want to keep you guys all day. We could talk about this for days, but you all have lives, and Rhode probably misses you. What's a message you would have young people, and anyone, not just young people, but specifically, you know, the people you want to reach? What message do you want them to take away from this film?
I want them to take away the fact that it is not impossible to change, number one. And change is internal, not external. You can say what you want to do, but until you decide internally this is what you want to do, it won't happen. I think that the next part to that is to get help. But what I want people to understand is there is nothing too hard for you not to get over. Now, do you need people around you to help push you there? Yes, Bill was just talking about that. He heard all of, us and a few other people to push him. It doesn't matter how many people push you. There's going to be that one message that's going to get you to make a change or make a decision. And so what I want to say to the young people is rather than, trying to do this on your own, trying to get together and make situations work for you, listen to wisdom sometime. Or just look at your heart. Just think about, do you really want to stay in this place where you can't go left or right or even forward? Do you want to be in a place where you feel rage all the time? Because that will lock your heart, lock you up, and it doesn't feel good. Do you ever want to be in a space where you're going to be the top person in the world? It's not impossible, but you have to make the decision what you want to do. Is there help out there? Yes. I'm your number one fan. I'm there. But there's a lot of people other than Sandy that will help you and step in. Just trust who those people are and make the change. Because I do believe strongly that young people, you're going to be the change agent in this generation to affect the next generation. And so there has to be a change made in you first.
That's powerful. I love that. Especially in today's climate, the way the world is right now.
And I believe in them.
Yeah.
I believe in them. I believe in you. I do. I believe in young people. I don't care who they are, what they do, where they come from. I believe in you. That's what I would tell them.
James, what about you? What message do you want folks to take away from this film?
For me, it's a very, very clear message, and I'm going to revert back to what I've always been wanting. I'm a type of person who goes, I want to change the world, and I want to make everybody, I want to inspire everybody, I want this, I'm going to work really hard to do that. And it was you who told me, he said, you know what, the only people that you might be able to change are people who are willing to listen. Because a lot of people, in your profession, you're a life coach, and you can't help anybody unless they want to be helped. So I actually began to understand that, and I said, well, at least maybe I can change the little corner of my world. I might be able to touch. And why not do it through documentary film, right? I can put it out, and a lot of people will just not watch the film or look away, but maybe somebody will watch Resilience Has a Face or some of the other films, and they'll go, you know what, maybe it can change.
I'd like to say something to that about the change part of it. Sometimes I don't think it's that people don't want to change. I think that they don't know that there has to be a change there unless someone says something. And we have to be open enough to let people know there is another side. There's a possibility. Instead of putting a label on people or young people, I talk about young people, that's my heart, putting a label and said, I know they can't, or I know they won't. No, I know they will, and I know they can, and let's do something about it. Yeah. And in my working with young people, yeah, they don't know sometimes they need a change. But when you pull out the good in them and work on that, you get the message across that way.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, and I think also I want to go back to something you said actually at the premiere when you did the closing remarks, and I think this is extremely powerful. I keep saying powerful. I think this is extremely compelling and influential because what you said is that sometimes people don't know that they can, right? And they have to see it to know it's possible. And I think that there's two camps, right? Some people who don't want to change.
Right, absolutely.
Probably can't help them the most, right? But to your point, the people who don't know that they can. They don't know what's possible until they see other people doing it, until they see stories like yours, right? Which is why it's so powerful you made this film. I said powerful again, didn't I? Which is why it's so amazing that you made this film. Because it will inspire people. It will show people that whatever they're going through, I guarantee you that whatever they're going through in their lives right now, the mass of it is not what you went through. And if you can come out the other side, so can they.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, James, Sandy, thank you guys both so much for being here and for talking through this today.
Thank you.
It's an amazing film. Resilience Has a Face. Check it out. James Bonato's links will be below. Dr. Saundra Rhode links will be also below. Please reach out to either one and or both of them. And thank you guys for joining us today. Hit the like button, hit subscribe. Follow for more information about these kinds of amazing people here. I'm lucky enough to call them friends. So thank you guys both for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.